Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into something kind of mind-blowing today? We're talking Mahasamadhi.
Ah, Mahasamadhi.
Yeah, the idea of consciously leaving your body. I bet some of you out there are thinking, hold on, is that even possible?
It's a question that has captivated humanity for ages, right?
It really has. And we're going to try to unpack that question today, exploring things like, well, samadhi, mukti, even how our bodies actually
But
work.
like some incredible stories to share too.
We do. A father and a daughter who both achieve this state.
Get ready. It's going to be a wild ride.
So to start, I think we got to define some terms. What exactly is samadhi?
Well, the word itself comes from sama, meaning equanimity, and di, meaning intellect.
Okay, so samadhi is when your intellect is in perfect balance.
Exactly. It's this state where the intellect is perfectly still and clear.
But it's not about being unconscious or death-like, is it?
Not at all. It's actually a state of heightened awareness.
Okay, so it's more like super awareness then.
That's a good way to put it. Imagine transcending those usual boundaries that your mind creates, like the separation between you and, say, a tree, or your hand and the table.
So it's about experiencing a deeper unity.
Yes. A oneness with everything. And, there are different levels to this state. Broadly speaking, we can categorize samadhi into two types.
Two types, okay.
Savikalpa samadhi, which is where you experience that oneness, but there's still a sense of I present.
Okay.
And then there's nirvikalpa samadhi, where even that sense of I dissolves. It's just complete unity, beyond any description or attribute.
Wow, that's hard to even imagine.
It is. But think about it like this, our usual perception of time and space. Well, those are constructs of the mind, too. In samadhi, yogis can transcend these limitations. And there are accounts of yogis using the state to essentially turn back the clock on their lifespan.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying they can actually manipulate their lifespan? How is that even possible?
It's about gaining a degree of control over life energies, or prana, that we typically don't have access to. By going beyond the limitations of the mind, they step out of the normal flow of time, allowing them to resolve pending karmic situations. Or maybe just spend a little more time in this physical realm.
Okay, so samadhi is a powerful tool, but it's not the end goal.
Right. Right. In the Indian tradition, the ultimate goal is mukti, liberation.
Okay.
It's considered even more significant than, attaining heaven or merging with God.
We often translate mukti as freedom, but it sounds like that doesn't quite capture it.
Yeah, freedom usually brings up these images of doing whatever you want, going wherever you please. But mukti is about becoming free from the very cycle of birth and death, from the limitations of existence itself.
So even the concept of freedom becomes limiting in the context of mukti. That's pretty mind-bending.
It is. Think of it this way. Nirvana, another term for mukti, literally means non-existence.
Non-existence.
It's not about existing in a state of ultimate freedom, but transcending even the need for freedom. There's no you, no separation, no limitations.
Wow, that's a whole other level of existence.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that both enlightenment and death involve a shift in the intensity of life energies. How does that fit into all of this?
That's a crucial piece of the puzzle. Imagine life energy as a spectrum.
Okay, spectrum.
At one end, there's extremely high intensity, which leads to enlightenment and often the departure from the body. At the other end, if the intensity drops too low, it results in death.
So our physical bodies exist within a certain band of this energy.
Precisely. And here's where it gets really interesting. Enlightened beings often need to employ certain tricks to stay in their bodies.
Tricks? Like what?
Well, they might consciously create desires or maintain karmic ties just to keep their energy levels from exceeding that threshold for physical existence.
So they're almost grounding themselves to this reality. That's fascinating. But how does Mahasamadhi fit into all of this? Is it just a fancy word for death?
Not quite. Mahasamadhi is a specific type of mukti where someone consciously exits their body without causing any harm. It's not about seeking death or escaping life, but about transcending the limitations of the physical form and merging with that ultimate source.
Okay, so that's a key distinction, right? It's different from suicide, which is often driven by despair or a desire to escape suffering.
Exactly. Mahasamadhi requires immense energy and an understanding of how the body functions. It's like consciously untying the knot that binds your life force to the physical body and then simply choosing to depart.
That sounds almost unimaginable. But you're saying it's actually possible.
It is. To understand this, we need to look at the concept of koshas.
Koshas.
Imagine them as different layers of our existence.
Okay,
We
like,
have a physical body, or the Annamaya kosha, which is the most obvious one. But there are also subtler layers, like the Manomaya kosha, that's the mind.
okay.
Pranamaya kosha, that's the life energies.
Gotcha.
And the Vijnanamaya kosha, that's the wisdom.
So it's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
That's a great analogy. In Mahasamadhi, you're not just shedding the physical body, but you're dissolving all these layers, leaving only the Anandamaya kosha, the bliss body. And this bliss body then merges back into that fundamental life element.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. So what about terms like Jiva Samadhi and Diksha Mrutyu? Are those also forms of Mahasamadhi?
They're related but distinct. Jiva Samadhi is when someone chooses to enclose themselves and end their life. This could be to avoid burdening others, or because they lack this specific knowledge to leave consciously.
So it's more about circumstance than a conscious exit.
Yes, often driven by compassion or a lack of knowledge.
Okay.
Now, Diksha Mrutyu is a bit different. This involves a guru initiating a disciple into death.
Like a guided process.
Exactly. It's conscious and guided.
That sounds almost ritualistic.
It can be, but in our modern society, it carries a lot of baggage and can even have legal repercussions.
Yeah, I imagine that would be quite controversial. But let's bring this back to something a little more personal. You've actually known people who achieved Mahasamadhi, right?
Yes, two individuals come to mind. Swami Nirmalananda, a yogi you were acquainted with, and Vijji, your wife.
Yes, Nirmalananda. His Mahasamadhi was a profound event. I remember the first time I met him, I was young, hungry after days of trekking. And I rode my motorcycle straight up the steps to his cottage. He came out, this gentleman with a permanent smile, and touched my mud-covered boots.
What a powerful image.
It was a bit startling, but also incredibly humbling. We developed a unique connection over the years, communicating mostly through silence and written notes.
A connection forged in silence.
Then, years later, when I visited him with Vijji, he shared his intention to leave his body.
Wow.
He was wrestling with how to make it happen consciously and wanted my guidance.
What a powerful moment that must have been for both of you.
It was. I explained what I knew about the process, the level of mastery required to shed the body without damage, the energetic preparations involved. Vijji was there too, listening intently, tears streaming down her face. We all knew this was really happening.
So this wasn't a spontaneous decision on his part. He'd been contemplating this for a while.
Yes, it was a conscious choice he'd made and prepared for, but it wasn't without its challenges.
What do you mean?
Well, he'd announced the date publicly, which sparked a lot of controversy. Certain groups accused him of promoting suicide, tried to involve the police. It caused him immense anguish, especially considering his gentle nature.
That's heartbreaking. You mentioned he wouldn't even pluck a flower for fear of hurting it.
That was Nirmalananda. Eventually, the police presence was withdrawn, but the social pressure remained. He was supposed to leave on January 15th, but ended up leaving 5 days earlier, perhaps worried about further disruption.
So how did it actually unfold?
He sat on a bench outside his cottage, and just before noon, in the presence of a small gathering, he peacefully left his body. It was a powerful testament to his mastery.
A testament to his mastery.
And Vijji, witnessing this, was deeply moved. It planted a seed within her.
It seems like that experience had a profound impact on her. What was her journey like?
You see, Vijji wasn't someone who did things gradually. She never really embraced yoga for its own sake. She only practiced because it was important to me.
I see.
People would often comment, surprised by her seemingly irreverent attitude towards it. But that was Vijji, honest and straightforward.
So how did this experience with Nirmalananda change things for her?
On the drive back from that visit, she was still emotional, tears flowing.
Yeah.
And I jokingly asked if she wanted to leave too. But her response was serious. It was as if a fire had been lit. She knelt in the middle of the road, determined. I casually told her to chant Shampo, never imagining the intensity with which she would embrace that simple practice.
It sounds like that simple instruction triggered something extraordinary within her.
It did. She became incredibly focused. Her sadhana intensified. It was like she was a completely different person. I tried to slow her down, reasoned with her.
You did.
Our daughter was young. Vijji's life was blossoming in so many ways. Why the rush?
What was her response to that?
Her answer was poignant. She said, right now, everything feels beautiful inside and out. This is how I want to leave. She didn't want to wait for things to change, for the inevitable ups and downs of life to take hold. She wanted to leave while everything felt perfect.
That's a powerful perspective, to choose to leave from a place of such completeness.
It was remarkable. And at that time, the Dhyanalinga consecration was in full swing. Vijji was deeply involved. And completing it with her was crucial for me.
I understand.
I knew something could happen, something could delay the process. So I made everyone take a vow to finish by the February full moon. My commitment to fulfilling my guru's will was absolute. It was his dream, passed on to me, and I was determined to see it through, with Vijji by my side.
So her personal journey and this monumental consecration were unfolding simultaneously.
Yes. And amidst all of this, Vijji had her own preparations to make.
Preparations?
We visited her family and mine one last time. Though they didn't fully grasp the situation.
I see.
We even attended a family wedding, which we hadn't done in years.
It must have been a bittersweet time.
It was. But Vijji approached everything with incredible calm and acceptance. She had a plan to cook and serve the brahmacharis with her own hands for 3 consecutive full moons.
Oh, wow.
It's a deeply meaningful act of service in our culture. And then on the February full moon, she intended to leave.
She had it all mapped out. So what happened next?
Well, it seems fate had its own timeline. On January 21st, we dropped Radhi off at school. Vijji had been preparing her for this departure, telling her she wouldn't be there for her birthday in March.
Oh, my.
They spoke about it matter-of-factly. I tried to dissuade her, but Vijji was firm in her decision to be honest with our daughter. We returned from Udi that evening, and 2 days later, on January 23rd, it happened.
That rare planetary alignment you mentioned earlier.
Yes, and it was Taipusam, a day significant for many sages who had chosen it for their Mahasamadhi. Everything seemed to align. That evening, a group from the yoga center had gathered in the shrine. Vijji had prepared food, and we were about to meditate together. A few minutes into the meditation, she got up, went to the bathroom, removed her jewelry, and came back. A little while later, she uttered Shambho 3 times, and she was gone.
Just like that.
Just like that. I noticed something was wrong and had the brahmacharis attend to her, but it was too late.
It's hard to grasp the level of mastery involved in leaving the body that way. You mentioned that even accomplished yogis struggle with this.
It's true. Nirmalananda, a realized being, needed guidance. Vijji, though, achieved this with an intensity and determination that surpassed my expectations. To throw off this life without injuring the body requires an incredible level of energy and understanding. She had the methods, but I never imagined she would be able to generate the necessary power without my direct assistance.
And yet she did. What's truly fascinating is her intuitive understanding. You mentioned she removed her jewelry.
Yes. It could have hindered her departure. It's something I teach, doing specific sadhanas. But I never mentioned it to her. It seems she just knew.
It speaks to a deep inner knowing. Do you think you could have stopped her?
Some people ask that, and the answer is maybe. A distraction, a guru's intervention. But once someone reaches a certain point, those things become ineffective. And why would I hold someone back who is so ready, so complete? It would go against the very nature of what we are seeking.
It's a profound question, isn't it? The line between holding on and letting go.
It is. Vijji was my beloved wife, but when she reached that state, those roles ceased to matter. She became a possibility that transcended those limitations. With her passing, she made me proud, not just as her husband, but as her guru, Vijaya Kumari, Victory's daughter. She truly lived up to her name.
Her story is incredibly moving, but these examples of Mahasamadhi, they're not meant to glorify death, are they?
Not at all. It's about recognizing the potential within us to transcend limitations, to consciously choose how we live, and ultimately how we leave this earthly existence.
You know, there's another fascinating story of Mahasamadhi that might shed further light on this. Have you heard of Layman Pang and his daughter, Ling Kao?
I have. It's a captivating tale, isn't it? Layman Pang, this 9th century Chinese Buddhist, decided it was time to leave his body. And his daughter Ling Kao, being a realized practitioner herself, was aware of his intention.
The story goes that on the day of his planned departure, Ling Kao reported a solar eclipse, prompting Layman Pang to get up from his prepared seat to look out the window.
And in that moment, Ling Kao seized the opportunity. She sat on her father's bed and left her body before him.
Some interpret it as a clever trick, but it could also be seen as something more profound.
Yes, perhaps Layman Pang had created such a potent energetic space that it facilitated her departure. Either way, it's an incredible example of the level of awareness and mastery these individuals possessed.
It certainly makes you wonder about the true nature of consciousness and the possibilities that exist beyond our ordinary understanding. What do you think? Would you say Ling Kao tricked her father, or that Layman Pang orchestrated his departure in this way?
It's definitely a question that invites deeper reflection, isn't it? Were her actions a clever ruse? Or did Layman Pang, in his enlightened state, orchestrate this seemingly playful exchange to facilitate both their departures? This story really highlights the enigmatic nature of Mahasamadhi, but I think we've covered quite a bit already in this deep dive. What do you think? Shall we continue exploring this further?
It is a question that lingers, isn't it? A daughter's cleverness or a father's orchestration. But I think the beauty of these stories is that they leave room for interpretation. They invite us to consider that, well, reality may not be as fixed as we perceive it to be.
I love that. And you know, what strikes me about Layman Pang's reaction is the lack of surprise or resistance. He just acknowledges his daughter's swiftness. It's as if he understood that this was all part of a larger unfolding.
Exactly. He even went on to cremate his daughter, observe the mourning period, and then he had a conversation with the governor before finally leaving his own body. There's such a profound sense of peace and detachment in his actions.
It really challenges our usual anxieties surrounding death, doesn't it? Makes you wonder if there's like a different way to approach this ultimate transition.
It does. Layman Pang and Ling Qiu's story, like the others we've explored, compels us to re-examine our own beliefs. What does it mean to truly live and die consciously? That's a question that stays with you.
It really does. You know, it's fascinating to me that Vijji wasn't like a lifelong yogi or a spiritual seeker in the conventional sense.
Right.
She embraced this path later in life, and yet she achieved what many dedicated practitioners spend their entire lives striving for.
It speaks to the potential that resides within all of us, wouldn't you say? It's not necessarily about years of practice or rigid disciplines, but about aligning oneself with a deeper longing, that yearning for liberation that exists at the core of our being.
And Vijji, in her own unique way, tapped into that longing with incredible focus. She wasn't bogged down by dogma or rituals. She approached it with a simplicity and directness that was truly remarkable.
That simplicity, it often allows us to cut through the mental clutter and access that core essence within. It reminds me of what we were discussing earlier about Samadhi, that state of equanimous intellect. It's not about suppressing emotions or detaching from life, but transcending the limitations of our usual mental chatter to experience a deeper unity.
It's like those limitations create the illusion of separation. And in Samadhi, that illusion dissolves, revealing the interconnectedness of everything. And that sense of interconnectedness seems to be a key element in all these stories of Mahasamadhi, whether it's Nirmalananda's deep empathy for all beings, Vijji's selfless service, or Layman Pang's acceptance of his daughter's choice. There's this thread of transcending the individual self that runs through their actions.
That's a beautiful observation. It ties back to the concept of mukti, liberation from the confines of our individual existence. It's not about escaping the world, but about recognizing our inherent connection to something far greater than ourselves.
It's like Mahasamadhi is not just a physical death, but a dissolution of all boundaries between self and other, between life and death, between the individual and the cosmos, emerging back into the very source from which we all emerged.
A profound way to put it. It's a powerful reminder that while our physical forms may be temporary, the essence of who we are is timeless, boundless, and interconnected with everything that is.
These stories of Mahasamadhi, they act like doorways to a completely different way of perceiving reality. They challenge our fears, they spark our curiosity, they invite us to explore uncharted territories of consciousness.
That exploration, that willingness to question and delve deeper, that's what truly matters, wouldn't you agree? It's what allows us to expand our understanding of life, death, and everything in between.
Absolutely. These deep dives aren't just about acquiring information, right? They're about prompting a shift in perspective, encouraging you, the listener, to look beyond the surface and contemplate the deeper mysteries that lie at the heart of our existence.
And who knows, maybe these explorations will lead us to reconsider what it truly means to live and die consciously. Perhaps that's the ultimate takeaway from these incredible stories of Mahasamadhi.
I think you're right. These aren't just stories to be admired from afar. They're invitations to embark on our own journeys of self-discovery, to explore the potential within each of us, to transcend limitations, and embrace the vastness of existence.
And who knows what we might uncover along the way. The possibilities are endless.
Speaking of possibilities, let's shift our focus a bit and delve into something that might be particularly intriguing to you, the listener. Remember how we talked about enlightened beings using tricks to stay grounded in their physical bodies?
Yes.
It's a fascinating concept, and it makes you wonder if they can consciously choose to remain, can they also consciously choose the manner of their leaving?
That's a compelling question. And it brings us back to the heart of Mahasamadhi, the idea of conscious death. If someone can achieve a state of such profound awareness and mastery over their life energies, could they then choose not only the timing, but also the specific circumstances of their departure?
Precisely. It begs the question. Is it simply about dissolving all the koshas, like we discussed earlier? Or would there be more nuanced ways to consciously disengage from the physical form?
It's a question that invites us to explore the intersection of science and spirituality. We've looked at the energetic aspects, the dissolution of the koshas, but what about the physical mechanisms involved? How does the body actually cease to function in cases of Mahasamadhi? Is there a scientific explanation that complements the yogic understanding?
Right, because we're not talking about illness or injury here,
Yeah.
right? These individuals are seemingly healthy, yet they choose to leave their bodies. It challenges our conventional understanding of death as a purely biological process.
Exactly, and this is where things get really interesting. Some researchers have started looking into the physiological changes that occur during profound meditative states, particularly those associated with advanced yogic practices. They're finding that certain individuals can exert a level of control over their bodily functions that we previously thought impossible.
So there might be a scientific basis for what yogis have been claiming for centuries. That's pretty remarkable.
It is. We're still in the early stages of this research, but it opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. What if, through specific practices, we could consciously influence our autonomic nervous system, the part of our body that controls things like heart rate, breathing, even cellular processes?
You're saying that we might have a greater degree of control over our physical bodies than we currently realize.
Exactly. And if that's the case, then the idea of consciously choosing the manner of our leaving becomes less fantastical and more of a potential reality. It raises some profound questions about the nature of life, death, and the power of human consciousness.
It definitely makes you wonder, are these stories of Mahasamadhi just extraordinary anomalies? Or are they pointing towards a human potential that we're only beginning to understand?
It's a question worth pondering, isn't it? And it invites us to consider the possibility that our understanding of death, and perhaps even life itself, might need to evolve as we delve deeper into the mysteries of human consciousness.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what are we truly capable of? How much of our potential is, like, still untapped? It's like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg here.
It's a humbling thought, to think that everything we think we know about life, death, consciousness, it all might need a total rethink. As we uncover more and more about these extraordinary things humans can do.
Totally. And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating, right? They force us to question everything, to, like, expand our awareness beyond, what we think we already know.
Speaking of expanding awareness, what about you, the listener? What's been standing out for you in all this? What's hitting home? What questions are popping up?
For me, it's that sense of, like, agency, that conscious choice. These individuals, they embodied that. It takes a certain kind of courage, to face death head on like that, to embrace the unknown with so much grace and acceptance.
It does. And it's not just physical courage, is it? It's like a deeper spiritual strength. They weren't afraid to let go of everything they knew, everything they identified with, to just merge back into that source.
That merging, that dissolving of boundaries,
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to grasp, We're so used to defining ourselves by, like, our bodies, our personalities, our experiences, to think of completely transcending all of that. It's awe-inspiring, but also kind of unsettling.
It really does challenge our whole understanding of reality. And that's exactly why these stories are so powerful, They shake things up, they make us question everything, and they invite us to see existence in this much vaster, more interconnected way.
It's like they're whispering to us, hey, there's so much more to life and death than you think. Don't get stuck in your limited view.
Exactly. And that invitation to expand our awareness, to explore all these possibilities of consciousness, that's what really resonates with me. It's like a wake-up call to awaken to our true nature, to the potential that's, lying dormant within each of us.
It's funny. We usually associate samadhi with, like, stillness, withdrawing from the world, right?
Right.
But these Mahasamadhi stories, they're full of action, full of purpose. Whether it's Vijji cooking and serving, Nirmalananda tending to his ashram, Layman Pang cremating his daughter, there's this engagement with life, right up until the very end.
That's such a good point. It shows us that liberation isn't about escaping life or becoming
Right.
passive, right? It's about living fully, consciously, with a purpose, even as we recognize that, our bodies are temporary.
And maybe, just maybe, by really understanding that impermanence, acknowledging that death is inevitable,
Yeah.
maybe that allows us to live more fully, more authentically right now, in this moment. It's like that awareness frees us to really savor each experience, each connection.
It's like a paradox, right? But it seems like confronting our deepest fears, accepting our limits, it actually opens us up to more joy, more love, more connection.
These Mahasamadhi stories, they're not meant to be imitated or copied exactly. They're more like, signposts, pointing towards possibilities. Possibilities that exist beyond how we usually think and experience the world.
They're invitations to question, to explore, to awaken to this whole other dimension of reality that's always been there. But we often miss it.
And maybe the biggest takeaway, the greatest gift these stories offer,
Yeah.
is that death isn't the end. It's a transition. It's emerging back into that boundless ocean of existence, a return to the source.
That's a beautiful thought.
So I think we've done a good job of unpacking this. It's a complicated topic, but a fascinating one for sure.
It is.
We've explored Mahasamadhi, all its different sides, the big questions it brings up about life, death, consciousness. Hopefully you, the listener, have a better understanding of this phenomenon now and the potential it shows us. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those minds and hearts open to the infinite possibilities. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep seeking.